Good evening, Hall of Fame Dynasty. It is I, your Commissioner, John, here once again to review and preview what we're looking at this next week. I do want to start the show off by saying thank you guys very much for all your kind words. I know you guys know what's going on in my life and what I'm dealing with, but just to update you guys, we haven't had any information new from what we expected, kind of. We were hoping to get some results today. We haven't gotten any, but I will obviously keep you guys up to date. And I know you guys are willing to step in and take over the show if need be. It's always easy enough for me to put it together throughout the week, especially with graphics-wise. I've got no problem with that. If you guys need anything, if you guys even want to make one, go ahead. It's pretty easy. So I appreciate everything you guys said before, and I'm always looking forward to what you guys have to bring to the table. Just always in suggestions or support, whatever it is. I want to thank you guys for that. So before we get too deep into emotions and everything else, why don't we go ahead and talk about what happened this last week? Because it was actually a very interesting week besides real life stuff. There was a lot of trades, and especially the night that it all went down, we had all of those trades going on. You had all the counters going on. I know I was obviously involved in a lot of them. Didn't come through, unfortunately, but I will say I'm glad they worked out the way they did, because the Ducks and the Avalanche did not get stronger throughout those trades. So that did help keep the balance of the league compared to when I traded Ben Simmons to the Raptors and Keith decided to, and Keith, all he could say was, "What have I done?" So obviously we'll kind of get into that here in a second, but it was an interesting week, and there were a lot of really good games, a lot of close ones, and a lot of blowouts. So let's get into that for this week. I'm really excited to talk about it just because there was so much that went on, and especially a lot that affected the standings and what we're going to look off for playoffs. And now that I say that, I realize I didn't put in the playoff slide like I planned, but I will still talk about it here. So before we get into the games, why don't I pull up the league page and we can kind of go through that. So screen share, and I will show you exactly what we are looking at for this time. So as you can see, right now, I lead the Chelios division after a very interesting week. And the Avalanche are tied with the Anaheim Mighty Ducks for the Ed Belfour division. So right now, if the season were to end today, it would be the Avalanche and myself with the bye week. And then we would have the Ducks as the number 3 seed, the Golden Knights as the number 4 seed, the Carolina Hurricanes as the number 5 seed, and the Nashville Predators and Kevin would lock up that 6th seed. The Kings, the Lightning, the Wild, and the Rangers are on the outside looking in at this point. The Wild actually have a crazy chance to get in. They would have to win out for the end of the year, which is insane to believe, as much as they've sold off and as bad of luck as they've had with their .310 win percentage. They will need to have a crazy run if they plan to make it. The Kings are 2 games out, and this is the team you really need to watch because they've been good. They've got a pretty decent schedule coming up. I like them. They're going to be tough to beat, and we'll see what happens. But the Predators have been hot. They've been in a really good streak. So as it is, that is our playoffs set. If the season were to end today and begin the playoffs, we still have a ton of weeks to go, and anything can happen, especially after what happened this last week. So mentioning that, we will get into the show for tonight. So league reminder to start. The trade deadline is on January 27th. That is Sunday, and that'll be at 10:59 Central Standard Time. So have those trades at least posted in the chat, and we will still do the 24 hours, and they are able to be pushed past that time. That is not a problem, but the agreement must be done before that time. Now, mentioning that, as I said before, we did have a huge week this past week, and it really came after the show, especially because of the fact that the Wild we kind of talked about a selling off of the Wild in a fire sale, and then Mac decided to go with it. He decided to push all of his chips in on a rebuild and move some pieces around, and it's a little confusing to me with the pieces he got back, because he did end up getting in some older pieces, as we'll look at. But the first one that really went down, one of the biggest ones, was clearly the swap of goalie Martin Jones, right winger Vlad Tarasenko, and center slash left winger slash right winger all around forward Leon Draisaitl, who was moved for right winger Alex Tuck and a bunch of other pieces, especially when it came to, I believe that was the Tyreek Hill. There was I believe there were some baseball components in there. So that was the huge trade. I tried breaking that up myself. I don't think anyone else really jumped in there too much. And with that, unfortunately, I was not able to break it up and kind of step in there. But it was with that was with the Vegas Golden Knights, as I did not put in there. Then the Wild continued their sell-off as they swapped out defenseman Morgan Riley and left winger Jason Zucker for two young defensemen in Charlie McAvoy and Rasmus Dahlin, with some other pieces as well. That was with the Carolina Hurricanes. And then the Wild continued their sell-off with Will Butcher and Jake Gardiner for Erik Karlsson, and that was a big part of a Trae Young trade that we'll discuss in the basketball section. But that was the only one that really didn't make much sense to me, as Erik Karlsson, obviously great defenseman, great player. He was commanding a lot. The fact that, the Wild really gave up a ton of pieces here, but it should end up working. I'm sure he has a plan. Mac doesn't do things just for the hell of it. And that swap was with the Vegas Golden Knights. And the Wild made one more trade, a much smaller trade, in acquiring my right wing prospect, Eli Tolvanen, for the Nashville Predators. That was obviously my piece, and he was able to swap him for starting pitcher Brent Honeywell. I was glad to get Honeywell. He's always been one of my guys. I liked him a lot, and even though we originally swapped Honeywell and a couple other pieces in the baseball draft, I'm glad to have Honeywell back on my baseball team. But obviously, we will dig back into that when it comes to baseball season. Now, the Kings swapped Jacob Markstrom and for center slash left winger Brock Nelson. This one, I think, really got overlooked just because of the fact that we had the Martin Jones Tarasenko trade obviously going on, and we also had the Riley and Zucker for two younger defensemen trade going on at the same time. And I kind of see it. This was between the Kings and the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. The Ducks wanted a better baseline for their goalie situation. They had a surplus at center slash left wing, and that's been the Kings' problem, is their forward play. So they were able to kind of both seal up their issues in this, which was great for both. I was glad to see that. And that one went off without a hitch. That was a pretty easy one. So all of that's what happened in the last week. I don't know if we're going to see as much movement this week, just simply because of the fact that, we obviously had the big trades, and a lot of the teams that wanted to sell off did sell off. And it's going to be tough to beat this last week, just because you had the Wild go full in on their rebuild. So we've covered all that. Why don't we go ahead and move on to the matchups and see what we could do? So obviously the first one that we're going to start with, not only because of the way that it ended, but because of the ramifications that this really had on the league, especially. This was one of the bigger ones on the week. You had the Carolina Hurricanes that were sitting at 10-5, or no, 9-6, while the Vegas Golden Knights were sitting at 10-5. They finally had a lead over the Carolina Hurricanes, and they were happy to have it for 1 week. And there was a lot of trash talk that was talked by Chris and his Knights early on in the year. They've been talking trash all year. And unfortunately, it came back to bite them in the ass, because Sean was able to spit out some hot fire takes earlier this week. And it worked off in Sean's favor, as he dominated this matchup by 120 points, 386.8 to 266.4. The Golden Knights had no chance, unfortunately, this week. We'll get into it here in a second, but it wasn't close. It seemed like it might be early on in the week, and after some more starts were made, it was clear that the Hurricanes were in their groove, that the Golden Knights were outclassed this week. So they both end up at a 10-6 record, tied for second in the Chris Chelios division. And this is going to make for a very interesting last 6 weeks of the season, as we do play 22 weeks, I believe, of regular season play. As I pull it up here, yep, 22 regular season weeks. We have 6 weeks to go. And this really is going to come down to it, because with this loss by the Golden Knights, it leaves them in a vulnerable position for that bye week, but also the division title. And it really could end up coming down to this matchup where, say, the Golden Knights just have an off week and the Hurricanes have a great week at some point. That one game is going to be huge. So why don't we dig into this one and see what happened? It's very clear from the very start. There was no, like, both teams set their lineups. I mean, you can see 67 starts compared to 66, but 100 more points from skaters for the Carolina Hurricanes, with 356 to 254 for Vegas. Not even close. The offensive performance was absolutely bonkers for the Hurricanes, and we really haven't seen them put up that type of performance this year. I mean, 24 goals, 33 assists. Played a fairly clean game with only 26 penalty minutes. They were able to take advantage of the power play, as they put up 12 points, 12 power play points this week. It really worked out in their favor, and they dominated in goalie play, which is something we haven't seen out of them at times, especially when they've got guys like Marc-Andre Fleury, Thomas Greiss, and Semyon Varlamov. They've been inconsistent at times. They've kind of bounced from good weeks to bad weeks. We've seen that throughout the league, but Carolina had this from the start at 5.86 points per start. That's tough to beat. I mean, the fact that you're averaging almost 6 points out of any player that goes is crazy. It's crazy performance. The Golden Knights were clearly outclassed with their 3.98 points per start. They had 10 goals, 22 assists, so a pretty respectable assist number. Definitely not enough goals on the week. And the biggest thing that hurt them was probably the 49 penalty minutes. Takes away about 24.5 points on the week. And that's unfortunate, because even though this one was decided by over 100-point difference, you never want to see 24 points stolen out of your total. It hurts. Obviously, they played very well on the power play as well. And unfortunately, their goalies didn't come through with only 12 points. And if you really dig into this, a lot of it just came down to the goal production for Carolina. They were very close in all the other categories. 6 difference in hits, 16 difference in blocks, a lot more faceoffs won by the Golden Knights. Fairly similar save numbers. Everything else came really close, but it was the amount of goals that the Carolina Hurricanes were able to put in. And I think a lot of that's going to be luck for that week, just partly based on shooting percentages, because of the fact that you can't always put up 57 points in a week based off goals and assists. It's a tough thing to do week in and week out. And no, Chris, I will not take Jared Cook. I am not looking for old guys, and especially not in that offer. So no, just to make it clear, I am not going to type back. It's a lot easier to do it this way. To say that Carolina really dominated this week would be an understatement, as we see they took all 3 stars of the week. We will start with number 3, defenseman Esa Lindell, who put up 24.2 points with the Carolina Hurricanes. You had right winger Victor Arvidsson put up 26.2 points. And you had center Mika Zibanejad, who absolutely dominated this week with 52.5 points on the week. And it's insane to me, the fact that, I know centers obviously have a good advantage when it comes to total points, with the fact that obviously they get faceoffs won. They have that in their back pocket. We usually don't see centers really hitting all too much. So really you don't have that. They may get a few blocks here and there. But when you are able to get that type of production out of Mika Zibanejad, who had 5 goals, 2 assists, 3 game-winning goals, and 4 power play points, that is amazing. The fact that 3 game-winning goals by him himself, where the Carolina Hurricanes had 5 game-winning goals on the week, I feel like this is the ceiling for the Carolina Hurricanes. This is if everything goes right. We've yet to see them crack the 400-point mark, and I don't know if they do this year, but absolutely stellar performance by Sean and his Canes. I'm interested to see what they do, especially after moving off some of their younger pieces this season. They are definitely still in contention and are very close. So that's this one. Let's move on to our next matchup this week. This looked like it was going to be close. The Rangers came out hot, and they held their own through the first 3 days against the Chicago Blackhawks. It was about 120 to 113 going into Thursday night. And unfortunately, that was the last time it was close, as the Blackhawks just tore away from the Rangers as they finished 381.7 to over 198.1. Obviously, a very dominant matchup for Chicago in this one. And that does bring them as the sole owner of the Chris Chelios division title right now at 11-5, while the Rangers fall to the bottom of the Chelios division at 4-12. I won't spend a lot of time on this one. I mean, we know Vic. It looked like he actually set his lineup this last week, as he was able to put together 51 starts on the week. And no, Jared Cook would not help. Chris, I hate to keep intervening with this, but Jared Cook is not on my short list of players that are interesting. So regardless, 190 points out of the skaters for the Rangers, which comes out to about 3.88 points per start total from the team. Not a bad offensive production week with 13 goals and 15 assists for a total of 28 points. Really good production for a team that really hasn't set their lineup all that year. And yes, Sean, it was an absolute beatdown. I will say that. It looked like it was going to be close, but it wasn't. So in this matchup, 43 penalty points, not the cleanest of games. It really wouldn't have made a difference. The biggest factor that we saw here were the 2 power play points out of the Rangers. That's not enough to win a week. I mean, it really isn't when it comes down to it. And the fact that they only got 7.4 points from goalies, obviously not setting your lineup kind of takes away from that. And the 7.4 points from their goalies really came, I wouldn't call it disappointing. And the fact that it's not enough. And clearly they were lacking in their skaters. A lot of it came down to the starts, but performance wasn't there. And we kind of knew that with the Rangers from the start of this year. Blackhawks obviously had a really good week out of their skaters, not the highest production out of their skaters this year. They were able to, but the team overall played very, very well at almost 5.5 points per start with 70 starts on the week, 20 goals, 33 assists for 53 points. Very clean game played by the Chicago Blackhawks, 16 penalty minutes, so only about 8 subtracted from their total, coming very close to another 400-point week. The biggest thing here was the 15 power play points for them. It's excellent production, especially, I mean, there's times where, yeah, you will get the power play possibility. You'll have that time on ice. You're not always able to convert, but 15 power play points on the week, it's 1 every 4 starts, which is great. And the biggest thing was 45.2 points out of their goalies. That's one of the higher totals that we've seen this year. And a lot of it came from, surprisingly, Carey Price. I mean, Carey Price hasn't been the guy of old. He's been very unreliable at times this year, but 20 points on the week with 2 wins, 3 goals allowed, and 75 saves is excellent. I mean, that's something you can't really always depend on, especially with the way the goalie pads have been made this year and goalies are still adjusting. But I'll take it out of Carey Price. It was a great week for him. And this was dominated. Just like the previous matchup, the Chicago Blackhawks dominated and showed it all the way through. And it really shines with our 3 stars of the week, starting with our 3rd star with center and right winger Steven Stamkos with 30 points. Center Ryan O'Reilly, who was one of my sleeper picks going into this year, especially moving to St. Louis. As cold as St. Louis really has been this season, he's been a really good fourth center for me. He's played very, very well, and he showed it this week with 31.8 points. And the hottest of hot with right wingers, Patrick Kane, 46.1 points on the week. He just had an absolutely insane week with 4 goals, 6 assists, 3 power play points, and 19 shots on goal, I believe, with only 3 games. He was shooting anytime he had a chance, and he worked really well with Alex DeBrincat. And those two really have found their groove in Chicago, and I'm glad to have them both on my team. So, unfortunately, DeBrincat wasn't as high, but we all know what Patrick Kane is. We know he's a scorer. We know he's going to find a way to try and put the puck in the net, and he did very well with it this week. So moving on, we have the LA Kings and the Tampa Bay Lightning. We know Steve and the Lightning have kind of been absent from hockey. I know he's been researching and trying to do what he can, but at this point, there's not a whole lot available on the waiver wire that is very, I guess, productive or very game-changing. And it really showed in this week because the LA Kings did not have their best week at only 296.5 and to Tampa Bay's 196. Tampa Bay, I believe, has been on the short end of the stick of 200 for the last few weeks. And this brings the Kings up to the 6-10 while Tampa Bay falls to 2-14. And like I discussed at the beginning of the show, the LA Kings are right on that spot behind the Nashville Predators for that playoff spot. They are still chasing that number 6 seed, and I think they can do it. I don't see why not when they're this close. They're only 2 games behind. And with a lot of division play left to go in these 6 weeks, I'm actually going to pull up the LA Kings. And before I dig into I'm going to dig into the schedule here real quick and look at what we have coming up, especially with the LA Kings. So we are currently in week 17, and the LA Kings are taking on the Hurricanes. They also have to face the Wild. They have to face the Ducks one more time, the Blackhawks. Then they take on the Rangers and the Colorado Avalanche. It is not going to be an easy road for the Kings at this point, but I think they still have a chance. So why don't we see what their team did this week and why they were able to come away with a much-needed win at this point in the season. 280.3 points from their skaters. Not spectacular, but really, really good. I believe that's in the top half of the league, which is what you need. That's all you have to do is be able to consistently be at the top of the league. 4.56 points per start on 65 starts. Excellent production there. 13 goals, 26 assists for 39 points. Fairly clean, only 13 total points taken away due to 26 penalty minutes. And they were right there with 12 power play points as well. It seemed like a very consistent number this week for power play points. And 16.2 points from goalies. Even after dealing Markstrom, they still have a fairly solid goalies core there. So even if you're sitting about 16, 20 points per week out of your goalies, it's a very good baseline. And that's kind of what you need. You're more looking for your goalies to be a holder of points. Not really. You want them to not every team can have that 40-point, 30-point week out of their goalies. You're just hoping they don't kill you too much. Now, moving on to the Tampa Bay Lightning. For 50 starts, they were able to produce 3.92 points per start. Not fantastic. Obviously, they've been struggling. They have some holes they need to fix. And maybe they'll find it by dealing some of their basketball pieces or even baseball, considering what they have a very good team in baseball and probably could recoup a lot of good players in hockey if they do so wish. 191 points out of skaters is not fantastic. Obviously, it still tops the New York Rangers, and that's kind of what we expect out of most teams is to be able to beat the Rangers. 20 penalty minutes, so obviously a cleaner game than the Kings. But not being able to convert on the power play for only 6 points, that was the hard part on the week for them. And it really showed. It's unfortunate that they have to sit there at the bottom of the league. They do have a decently talented team. I think a lot of it comes down to setting that lineup and putting players in position to perform, because you can't expect to be 15 starts behind and be able to play well. They did have guys like Gabriel Landeskog who put up 30 points, David Perron, who put up 18. You had Andy Green as a defenseman put up 23. This Lightning have a very solid team, and if they can set their lineup, they could be right up there with a lot of teams, I think. Now, obviously, this is another very dominant matchup in hockey. LA took all 3 stars this week, and they were bright, with left winger Ryan Nugent-Hopkins putting up 31.4, left winger Brad Marchand putting up 31.5, and a name that we really haven't seen at the top of any board recently was center Jonathan Toews, 35.9 points. He was a part of that really hot Blackhawks attack this last week. As a Blackhawks fan, I was glad to see him play well. He had a very insane week, especially as a center. It's great for him to see. He hasn't been the same over the last 2 years, so when you can get production out of him like this, you run away and take it, because that is perfect what you need. If you have him at the top of your board, you probably have a very good team, and he's just outperforming his week. So excellent job by LA and Chris on a very on an underdog matchup right now, as he is trying to dig his way out of that hole that was created by the previous owner. I'd like to see him make the playoffs. Obviously, that would come at the expense of Kevin, because that is the way that it sits for Nashville. So I would rather, I can't say I have any stakes in the game at that point with those two, but it'll be interesting to see how those two play off. Now, this one was definitely my game of the week. I told you guys this was going to be close. This was going to be a fun one. And actually, I'm going to pull it up because I don't remember which way I went with this. I may have gone with the Colorado Avalanche, but I'm pulling it up. So regardless, obviously we know the Belfort division, the Colorado Avalanche have had the lead pretty much all year. I think they've only succumbed the lead about 2 times this year, maybe once before this. But the Ducks said, no more, I've had enough. And we heard Jared on the show last week say, I feel like my team is there. I feel he's been one of the top performers week in and week out. And he showed it this week. The Ducks came to play this week with 353.9 points as they dominated the Colorado Avalanche by over 30. 30 points really isn't that big of a difference, but it's huge enough. It really is. The fact that they were able to do this to a division opponent, to the division leader, and they showed their worth. Jared, great job this week. You had an excellent performance. And looking at last week's show, I did take the Avalanche. You also took the Avalanche. I think Kevin actually took the Ducks. He was the only one that believed in you, Jared, and it paid off for Kevin. So it ended up working out in his favor because the Colorado Avalanche are that much closer to the Nashville Predators. I don't expect the Predators to be able to compete for the division title, but being that much closer makes it that much more fun in the playoffs. So obviously both teams are 12-4 now. They share a lead for the division, and I'm really curious to see how these play out over the next few weeks. Very close, totally. Really overall, if you look, 302.6 points out of the Colorado Avalanche bench, 4.8 points per start on 67 starts. And that was really close to the Ducks' 5.20 on 68 starts. It really came down to, it wasn't, you had a ton more starts than me, or the balance of, schedules didn't work. It was simply efficiency, and that's what you need. Ducks had 332.3 points out of their skaters. They obviously had the advantage there. And you really look at everything that we have here on the board of 18 goals compared to 14, 28 to 28, 36 penalty minutes for the Colorado Avalanche really hurt. 36 to 16 doesn't sound like a lot, but in the end, that's 10 points off the total, bringing it to about a 20-point difference. Had the Colorado Avalanche even knocked themselves down to about 16, 17, 18 penalty minutes on the week. The Avalanche were able to be more efficient on the power play as they converted 16 points, while the Ducks only converted 13. And while I look at this matchup, let's see what the difference was, because as you look below, there was only a 2-point difference between the goalies. So why don't we dig into this one? I know we don't really display the other stats really all that much because they are a lot less insignificant. And the Ducks did have a hat trick on the week this week, which is great. That was one of the reasons they were able to win. And that hat trick came from Thomas Hertl, right winger of the San Jose Sharks. He put up 3 goals with that hat trick, and obviously all of his production came in one night, which is kind of unfortunate, but that was a big difference there. They both had 1 game-winning goal on the week, and what it came down to was more of the peripheral stats for us, with 25 more hits, 9 more blocks, which that itself is 9 points with the blocks, and about 25 more faceoffs won. So it was the little things. The Ducks played a better, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh boy, I can't believe I'm failing on this. The fact that they played not instructional. I can't think of it. They played a better baseline game, and they were able to keep everything. They played a well-rounded, all-around game this week, and I still can't believe I'm blanking on it. And I'm sure I'll think of it later on. But very balanced in terms of stars of the week. Obviously, right winger Mikko Rantanen was the best player for the Colorado Avalanche with 26.4. Defenseman Shea Weber for the Ducks put up 26.9, and center Connor McDavid did as usual with 28.8. Not the greatest week. I mean, no huge weeks out of anyone for either team, but just the 3 stars of the week goes to show just how close this matchup was and why this matchup was so much fun to watch. So let's move on to our last one of the week, and it's unfortunate. I mean, I love what Kevin's doing, and I'm glad to see him succeeding. It sucks that it had to come at the expense of the Mac and his Minnesota Wild because of the fact that Mac was so confident going into this matchup that it was crazy. Or going into this year, we expected Mac to be able to dominate after kind of getting lucky in baseball and making the playoffs there as a 6th seed when we still had 12 teams. When he made the playoffs with the Vikings as an underdog because he did sell off a guy like Melvin Gordon at the risk of, okay, James Conner won't be the starting back this year, but obviously for the future it works. Unfortunately, the Wild have had the worst year, and it continued this last week as the Nashville Predators won another close game, 285-274. And the Nashville Predators, I don't know what it is about your team, Kevin. They love to make you stress. They love to make you sweat over and over and over. Every week, you seem to be in the closest matchups of the week. I seem to find you at the back of this slideshow every week, which it's not a bad thing. But obviously, the stress is a lot more on you than it is some of the other members of the league. So obviously, this brings Kevin up to 8-8, the first time he has been 500 all year, I believe. And I'm glad to see it. As I'm glancing through here, the Preds did win in week 1. They ended up losing in week 2 and then lost in week 3. So this is the first time they have been at the 500 mark for the first time all year since week 2. And it's taken a while, but the Preds have gotten there. They've moved some guys. They traded Chris Letang, but they ended up solidifying their team more. And what they needed was just a better all-around balanced game, and it showed because they were able to take down the Wild, who are still a good team. Obviously, as they go into rebuild mode, they still put up 274 points. So it's not a bye week for anyone when they face the Minnesota Wild. And the funny thing is the Minnesota Wild actually outperformed the Preds in a lot of categories here. So 261-246 in terms of skater points. The Wild were much more efficient. Well, not much more, but 4.74 points compared to 4.6. 4 less starts for the Wild. I'm sure there were a few that were missed and could have brought the Minnesota Wild a much better, could have brought those starts up and ended up winning this week. But we know that the Wild aren't ready to compete this year. The funny thing is you look here, 11 goals to 15, 26 to 23 assists. And the Wild played a very, very clean game this week with only 8 penalty minutes on 58 starts. That itself is, I give you a round of applause, Mac. You've coached your guys into a great, very efficient game, as we can see. They're not willing to take stupid penalties, and it played out in your advantage for the most part. But the difference maker here was the 11 power play points to 6 power play points. The goalies were very close, 28-23. And this was another one I had to look at when I was making the show of why did this go this way? And a lot of it, once again, came down to the peripherals, the outside things that we don't tend to look at, with the Predators piling up 30 more hits, 13 more blocks, and a bunch more faceoffs won. And that's really where it came down. It was, once again, a very clean game played by the Preds, except for the penalties. That really brought them down. But they played a very good game and played it all around. They were still able to be aggressive, even though they weren't finding the back of the net. They weren't hitting twine with the puck. It is what it is. But they played a very well-rounded game, and that's what you need, because that brings consistency. And consistency brings wins. You hear me, Chris? Consistency brings wins. That being said, this is it. The 3 stars of the week just go to show how close this matchup was. The funny thing, I believe this is the first time we've had a goalie as one of the stars of the week, and goalie John Gibson comes in at the 3rd star of the week with 22.6 points for the Minnesota Wild. The best player on Nashville was left winger Evander Kane, as he put up 29.5 points on the week. Then you had center Sean Couturier, who put up 34.9 for Minnesota. It was the Couturier show with 3 goals, 2 assists, a game-winning goal in there. He did everything. He filled up the stat sheet, and that's what you need out of a guy like Couturier, who you spend a high pick on. You can't rely on all these guys that are late-round sleepers or breakout candidates, and Couturier provided that floor and ceiling for the Minnesota Wild this week, even though they ended up on the short end of the stick. So let's move on to week 17. Like I said, 6 weeks to go. This is crunch time. This is the time your team has to step up. So starting with my game, it's me and the Nashville Predators, Chicago versus Nashville. Obviously, very heated rivalry in the NHL, and I'm expecting this to become a rivalry here. Even though we are not in the same division, I've had some very good matchups with Kevin throughout this year, whether it was baseball, football, or hockey. I haven't paid too much attention to NBA recently, but I know Kevin always puts together a very competitive squad, and I'm excited to face him this week. He's played very well. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to take myself in this matchup. I hate to do this to you, Kevin, but just the way the Blackhawks have played for my team, they've heated up recently, and I'm really happy. You know what? Fuck your Predators, Kevin. So I'm going to take the Blackhawks this week. I just like what my team has done. They've been playing very well. I know Kane's not going to put up another 46 points on the week, but I expect the other guys to pick it up. So I'm going to take the Blackhawks. Next, we've got a very good matchup in the Carolina Hurricanes taking on the LA Kings. And this one, especially if the first game goes the way I'm hoping it goes, could be huge. And with that, the LA Kings could really take advantage this week, in especially only being 2 games behind, but they do face a very tough Carolina Hurricanes that got better this last week. Even though they traded off some younger pieces, they were able to get a guy like Morgan Riley, and that's going to boost their defense a lot, especially out of the defensemen. They really haven't had great production, or at least they've had good production, but not great production. Now they've got in Morgan Riley. Unfortunately, I'm going to go LA Kings in that. Or actually, I will take the Hurricanes. I think the LA Kings fall just short after seeing what the Hurricanes did do this last week and the pieces they acquired. I originally was leaning LA, but just looking at what the Hurricanes have done and will likely continue to do, I'm taking the Hurricanes in this matchup. Next, the third matchup of the week, the one that I really don't have a lot of interest in. Obviously, we know, like I said, the Minnesota Wild are rebuilding. The Tampa Bay Lightning have not found their stride. They've been cold all season, which is clearly the opposite of the real-life Lightning. So simply put, give me the Wild. I still think they have a great team. It's obviously going to take a year or 2 to get where they want to be. But give me the Wild in this matchup over the 2-14 Lightning. This next matchup is this is my matchup of the week. You have the Ducks taking on the Golden Knights. The Golden Knights have kind of hinted at a sell-off. Unfortunately, it comes at the cost of they're sitting second in the division. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how his team is going to perform, and same with the Ducks. I mean, anything can happen. If you lose somebody to injury within these last 6 weeks, it makes a big difference. And with the way the Ducks have performed, they've shown an ability to continue to perform, to give a good baseline of over 300 points a week. They really haven't had many floundering matchups, which is great. But a lot of it does come down to consistency. So I'm going to take the Ducks in this matchup. The problem is the Golden Knights have kind of fluctuated. The Ducks have shown a much more stable performance out of their team. So give me the Ducks. I like what they do. They're going to have to probably up their offensive production this week, because if you do look, the Ducks were at 353 this last week. The Golden Knights were at 266. Obviously, we've seen the Golden Knights play a lot better than the 266 they showed this last week. So I think the Ducks have to at least stay where they were this last week if they want to win. And this last one, there's no contest. I love you, Vic, but you don't set your lineup. So obviously, give me the Colorado Avalanche. Easy pick here. That's my lock of the week, and that's what it is for hockey. So why don't we move into basketball, and we'll see how it played out on the hardwood this week. So obviously, transferring from the ice to the hardwood, the trade deadline is different. The trade deadline for NBA is Sunday, February 3rd at 10:59 Central Standard Time. This is a week after the hockey deadline, so keep that in mind. Oh, I picked that wrong. So anyways, we had a lot less interesting trades this last week with basketball, and I think a lot of it is some of us still learning how to value the players, how we want to value them, what we want to do, and especially learning just what it's going to take to make the playoffs and make a real life run in this league for the championship. The real question that I have before we get into the trades is anyone going to be able to dethrone the Toronto Raptors? I mean, we saw the Colorado Avalanche run it wire to wire this year in baseball. We saw and unfortunately, they won there. We saw the Bears and Broncos run the table in football. Neither of them came out the champion. That was the Dallas Cowboys. And we've seen, like I said, we've seen the Ducks and the Avalanche run it in hockey, but we don't know where that's going. That's much more open. When it comes to basketball, the Toronto Raptors have run through everyone at this point. So they're going to be tough. And I was glad to see some of these trades made, just to see shake up this league, especially with the Toronto Raptors leading everyone. It'll be fun to see how this goes. So obviously, part of the trade that we talked about in NHL was between Mac and Chris. A big piece of that trade was Trae Young, who is officially an Atlanta Hawk in real life and fantasy. He does get to move home now to Atlanta and become a part of that core for the Atlanta Hawks, who don't have a ton of youth. So this is a good get for them. Unfortunately, they could have had a guy like Devin Booker, but they decided not to do that. That was their own choice. They're betting on the upside of Trae Young and possibly becoming a Devin Booker-like guy. I personally don't see it happening, so it is what it is. But because of them adding Trae Young, they did have to move a veteran in Mike Conley. He did end up getting some MLB prospects, which was good. It helps the rebuild of the Pittsburgh Pirates, so we'll see how that plays out. There was a lot of claims and drops this week, as you can see below. Lakers picking up Rashawn Holmes, cutting Tyson Chandler. Rashawn Holmes is great for rebounds. He's getting about the same playing time as Chandler, but he also is producing more points. So overall, that's a net positive for the Lakers this week. We saw the Timberwolves claim small forward and power forward Marvin Williams. Good get for them. And we did see the LA Lakers also make two other moves this week in claiming Dwayne Wade while cutting Mason Plumlee, and dropping Alan Crabb while picking up Danny Green after he was dropped by the Atlanta Hawks, who for whatever reason have kind of been playing the waiver wire recently. And the last one is the Dallas Mavericks did claim Carmelo Anthony after has been rumored that he will find a home by February 7th. Obviously, that's after our trade deadline, but there will be some fun there because Carmelo Anthony will have a home. He will be playing, and that was a lot of the risk that came with him. So I figure I may as well grab him up while I can. Maybe there's some value left there for myself. I don't know yet, but Carmelo Anthony is now a Maverick. Where he goes in real life, we will have to wait and see. So let's move on to the matchups from week 14 and see what happened this week. And while while Mac may have played a very close match in hockey, it was not that way in basketball. When it comes to the hardwood, the Timberwolves forgot how to play. They used all of their energy in hockey, and unfortunately, it led to an absolute massive beatdown as the Pelicans were able to go 8-1-0 on the week, and that is just what Kevin's been looking for. I know he's been searching for it. He's been putting together a good basketball team, and he's making that huge move. He's finally finding his groove. That team is playing very well in a very tough division with obviously Keith and Jared, who want to run the table in every league, but Kevin's having no part of that. And the Pelicans finally move above 500 once again, 65-61-0, while the Timberwolves will fall to 56-69-1. They've had some issues playing consistently week to week, and it shows as they were able to play a close game last week, but fall to almost a sweep this week, unfortunately. So obviously, let's look at the matchup here. Didn't seem very close really in anything, and about the closest it came down to was it really didn't have to do with the shooting. It came with the team play. 14 difference of 14 rebounds, 25 assists. And it was actually, I was surprised to see the Timberwolves with 45 steals and 17 blocks on the week compared to 32 and 19. Very close in turnovers, not even close in points scored. You really look at it, there were some parts of the game that were close, but the Minnesota Timberwolves just didn't show up this week. And unfortunately, their team MVP was small forward Kelly Oubre Jr. And when that is your team MVP for a week, you know you had a bad week. So unfortunately for the Timberwolves, that's where they ended this week. And the Pelicans played awesome. They 95 three-pointers made. Excellent week out of them. That's one of the best weeks they've had as of late. Like I already talked about, the rebound, steals, assists, excellent numbers there. Not the highest in the league, but still excellent enough to take 8 wins on the week. And I was glad they were an excellent shooting team this week from the floor, 513 or 513 field goal percentage of 513 and the free throw percentage of 833. Excellent performance out of that. You'd like to see that free throw percentage maybe a little bit higher, but that's definitely above where we've seen other teams, especially when you have the Timberwolves at 706. And the Pelicans team MVP was Blake Griffin. The reason for that was he put up a triple digits in points, and it's going to take me a minute here to get to it, but I know he had triple digits in points, and it was a great performance out of him. I mean, that's a guy we haven't really seen fill up the stat sheet like that in a while, at least for the Pelicans. So I'm sure Kevin's not arguing with that type of performance, especially when you are able to convert that into about 800 points out of your team. So as I pull it up, with the New Orleans Pelicans, you had Blake Griffin shooting almost 500% from the floor, almost double digits in three-pointers, 25 rebounds, 21 assists, and 119 points on the week. Out of a power forward, when you can get 119 points and it isn't a guy like LeBron, that's an excellent week. The next closest would have had to have been Stephen Curry, who had 100 points on the week, but he just didn't seem to produce in the other spots when it came to steals, blocks, and turnovers. So, I mean, great week out of Blake Griffin. You'll take it every time you can. So moving on, it was the Chicago Bulls taking on my Dallas Mavericks. And unfortunately, with everything else that went on in my life this week, I kind of put NBA on the back burner. It's not been a passion of mine this year, but I will get back to it. It's something that I'm just messing around with who I like in this squad and really messing with the chemistry of the team. And I did take a loss this week, 2-7-0, while the Bulls topped me 7-2-0. And I mean, obviously, I was still able to get to hockey, but that was something that took 2 minutes. The fact that I'm still learning about basketball fantasy-wise, I'll take it. So 57, 67, and 2 for the Bulls, while the Dallas Mavericks fall to 41, 8, 85-0. And a lot of it, I was surprised. I was glad to see my team held it together, really, without setting the lineup. I was still able to shoot over 500% from the floor, 41 three-pointers made on the week. We tied it says we tied in free throw percentage there, but Fantrax does calculate it a lot smaller of a decimal than I have listed here. So the Bulls did take that by over 1,000, well, more than 1,000th of a point. It was really close there. Obviously, rebounds and assists weren't even close. I wasn't able to get much out of steals and blocks. I mean, low turnovers, which is good, but that leads to usually a low points scored because you're not getting the ball as much. You're not able to put it up. And the Bulls had a really good week. If you compare it even to the Pelicans, obviously they don't have the points scored, but they did limit their turnovers. They were able to produce a decent amount of blocks and still not as many steals as you'd like to see. But they were obviously able to spread the ball around. 54 three-pointers made. It seems like the magic number for three-pointers each week, if you want to be a winner, seems to be around that 60, 65 mark. So obviously not what you want to see. And the Bulls team MVP for this week was small forward Tobias Harris. A lot of that came down to his peripherals. Obviously, he put up some good points, but when you look at it, Harris he shot over 500 from the field. He put up 93 points, but the biggest thing that made the difference to me was not only adding those points with 13 three-pointers, but he was also able to put up 30 rebounds and 17 assists and 5 steals. So he accounted for a sixth of the team's steals in the given week. So great out of Tobias Harris for the Bulls. And my team MVP, once again, was Jamal Murray. He's put the team on his back. He's trying to carry this team. And he's an absolute stud with 15 three-pointers made on the week and a 1,000 free throw percentage, really bringing me up to that 808. He didn't have the rebounds or assists like you'd like to see, but 72 points with that good field goal percentage, I'll take it. So moving on, we traveled down to Atlanta this time. And the Atlanta Hawks have been a team that's wanting to compete in basketball. They've been making a lot of moves, even if it's not the biggest of moves. They are doing all they can to try and be competitive this year, while the Knicks kind of were set up to be that team. And injuries have really hurt them recently. Obviously, LeBron's been out. That hurts them as a big portion of their team. But we'll kind of get into who carried that team. And unfortunately, it wasn't very many people, as the Knicks fell to drop this matchup 2-7-0, while the Hawks were obviously able to take 7 wins out of it this week. This brought the Hawks up to 74, 50, and 2, while the Knicks dropped to 55, 70, and 1. And with that 74 win mark, that does bring the Hawks. They are the new leader of their division, and I can never remember which division we are in here. I believe it is the Michael Jordan division. That would be correct. So the Hawks are now the new leader of the Michael Jordan division at 74 wins, while the Lakers sit at 73 wins. So we'll kind of get into the Lakers here in a few minutes and show you just what happened. But this was actually a lot closer for a team that didn't set their lineup. The Knicks played their ass off. 433 to 488 field goal percentage, not even close. The fact that the Hawks only put up 55 three-pointers this week really surprised me. They're not a team that has ever been a high-scoring team when it comes to three-pointers, but you've got to put up more than 55, like I just talked about in the last matchup. That 60-65 base is where you need to be with three-pointers in this league. They were sitting at a 761 free throw percentage, not great, not outstanding, but it got them the win. 244 rebounds, 164 assists. They were the only other category they lost would be turnovers with 78 to 65. Obviously helps when you have less players for the Knicks, but this one really wasn't even close except for when it came to the shooting. When it came to from the free throw line and shooting from beyond the arc, that's what made this matchup as close as it was. If the Hawks maybe get one more start or find that guy that can drain some threes from downtown, that's what you need. So, I mean, the Knicks were only 100 points off from the Hawks this week, and we know they weren't in the same. The Hawks had 48 starts compared to the Knicks 30. The Knicks could have dominated this matchup if they really wanted to, and that's where Vic has to step up and do it. If he can do it, this would have been a blowout for them over the Hawks, really sending the Hawks into a tailspin. but they just couldn't get it done this week. Unfortunately, for the Knicks' sake, though, Kyrie Irving put the team on his back. He carried them this week. He shot over 600% from the floor, double-digit three-pointers, double-digit rebounds, 34 assists. 14 turnovers hurts, but when you're putting up 97 points, you're not going to get mad about that performance. And once again, the team MVP for the Atlanta Hawks was Donovan Mitchell for the second week in a row, as he put up 80 points, 483 field goal percentage, not a whole lot else in the stat sheet, not a lot of three-pointers, not a lot of rebounds, barely double-digit assists. Not the best week, but it got the job done. So congratulations, Hawks, on your winning week and also new division, holding on the division right now over the Lakers. So like I talked before, the Toronto Raptors have been dominant. I really thought they would dominate this matchup more. And we kind of talked about this on our show last week with Jared, and he said if I didn't finish with 7-2-0 at least, I feel like I didn't perform. I told him, you're leaving meat on the bone if you don't go 7-2-0 at least. And he left the meat on the bone. He did not get it done. He got the winning week, but that's not what you expect when you're taking on a tanking/rebuilding team in Charlotte. Toronto took this matchup 6-3-0. Not where you expected it to be. It's still a winning week, so it does bring the Raptors up to 92 wins on the year with 34 losses, while the Charlotte Hornets have just as many wins as the Raptors do have losses at 34, and they are sitting at 91 losses and 1 tie. So these are almost completely flipped teams, and it really shows. We know what the Charlotte Hornets and Sean want to do. They want to dominate the diamond, not the hardwood. So we saw that really make a difference, and I was surprised to see some of the categories that the Hornets were able to win. A 15-point difference in field goal percentage between these teams, and the Raptors really didn't play as well offensively as we've seen them do in past weeks. Only 73 pointers made, where they were looking at triple digits or even close to 90 every week. Hornets only have 27. We know they're rebuilding. It's going to be a category that's brutal for them week in and week out. But they did shoot when they got their chance to at the free throw line. They had their chances and they took advantage of it, shooting over 800%, which is great. When it comes to the counting stats, not much to talk about there. Obviously, the Raptors over 300 rebounds again. They've been that team all year. They are always going to take the ball any chance they get, with 56 steals, 32 blocks, and like we discussed last week, 102 turnovers. I expect the Raptors to be in triple digits every single time, and that's how they play. They're willing to give the ball up. They are going to score on you week in and week out, night after night. It is what it is, and that's shown by their team MVP and James Harden, who had an absolutely insane week. So as we look at it, shooting almost 500% from the floor, almost 900 from the free throw line, 27 rebounds, 14 assists, and I haven't even gotten to the biggest part of their game. The reason they had 856 points, while they didn't need all those points, you literally could have taken everything away from James Harden, and the Raptors still would have won this week. But James Harden put up 163 points, the same amount of assists that the Raptors had on the week. That is insane. 163 points, 19 of those shots were three-pointers that went down and sank. Team MVP for the Hornets was Darren Collison, point guard for the Indiana Pacers. Nothing spectacular out of his week. He did perform well from both the field goal percent or from the floor and the free throw line. Double digits in assists and rebounds, one short of that in steals. And he was able to put up 56 points. So the Hornets still have a good core to work around. Obviously, they have a lot to do in terms of rebuilding this team, but I like what they've got, especially in a guy like Darren Collison. You've got Evan Fournier, you've got Jaren Blossomgame, who is going to be able to do something for you week in and week out. We'll see what happens with this team, but the Raptors took this one pretty convincingly. Now, for our final matchup of the week, this was the closest one, and this was the most fun one. I told you guys to watch this one, and I can't believe my eyes when I see that the Nuggets lost this week 4-5-0. While the Lakers obviously grabbed 5 wins here, it is not enough to keep the division lead for a week. We've seen the Lakers and the Hawks bounce between each other in the Michael Jordan division, and the Nuggets hate to see this because they wanted to try and keep up with the Toronto Raptors, and especially with the Raptors only taking 6 wins this week, they needed it. The Nuggets officially fall to 79, 47, and 0. Well, the Lakers bring themselves up to 73, 52, and 1. This is a matchup that could make a difference between the 3 and 4 seed or even the 2 and the 4 seed. Because right now, obviously, if the Lakers don't win their division, they are a wild card. They do not get the bye week. And with this, especially when it comes down to it, you may have the Raptors and the Hawks win their divisions. You have that 3rd seed coming down between the Nuggets and the Lakers at this point. Obviously, the Pelicans are only 8 games behind the Lakers, so both teams have to be on their asses with this. But the Lakers made a good point here and are showing, hey, I'm Chris. I'm here to stay. Respect the name Barnes. So, I mean, it is what it is. And I like the color of the green here with the Denver Nuggets. I put that together myself as I stopped using the new logo and brought back the old logo for this. So let's look at this one. This is one of the closest matchups. I don't know what happened to the Denver Nuggets. I really expected them to have a much better week than this. They had a worse field goal percentage. The part that surprised me was 37 3-pointers made on the week. 37 3-pointers. Keith, what happened here? Your team fell apart this week. Obviously, I mean, you lose the first 3 categories off the board, and you start digging into more of the defensive play with rebounds. And obviously, assists is an offensive category, but rebounds, it comes down to offensive and defensive rebounds. The Denver Nuggets barely take the steals category with only 4 more, while the Lakers are able to convert that into 9 more blocks and, unfortunately, 14 more turnovers. But this is the worst week I've seen the Denver Nuggets play, as they only put up 569 points compared to 670 points scored for the Lakers. The Lakers played their ass off this week, and Barnes, you did a hell of a job getting this team where it needed to be. And I don't know what happened in the Nuggets this week. Obviously, they still took assists. They still took rebounds. But this was a really close matchup where I thought the Nuggets were going to have much stronger play. And a lot of it came down to guys like, I mean, obviously their team MVP was Giannis Antetokounmpo, who was the #1 overall pick this year. And it seemed like he was the only one that came to play. He had 64 points, 600 field goal percentage, only 1 3-pointer made, which we kind of don't expect a lot out of him. But a bunch of rebounds, 18 assists. But guys like Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic really regressed this week with only 3 3-pointers made, 33 points on the week, and shot below 400%. While the Lakers played their ass off, Jimmy Butler didn't play a full week as he is out. He is injured recently, but you had guys like Nicholas Batum put up 35 points. You had Jordan Clarkson put up 48. You had Dwayne Wade have a really good day for the Los Angeles Lakers as he shot 500%, 3 3-pointers, perfect from the free throw line, and double-digit assists and rebounds. So the Lakers have found a way to make this team competitive and really are looking to make that championship run, which is great because Barnes hasn't been able to do that in baseball or football just yet, obviously due to the time that he came around. But the Lakers show they're for real. So Chris, you guys better be on each other's asses because this is going to be a fun division race when it comes down to it. So let's move into Week 15 matchups. And we do have, I believe, only 7 weeks left in the regular season. We are currently on period 15. So 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah. We only play till week 21, so 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. We have 7 weeks left. Once again, only 1 week behind NHL, and that is going to – we do have the All-Star game coming up in period 18, so that will take up 2 weeks worth of play. So with week 15, let's dig into these matchups and kind of come up with some predictions. Obviously, you've got my lowly Mavericks sitting at the bottom of the league, taking on the Timberwolves, who coming off a hard luck loss like that just didn't show up. I don't know what to think of my team. Obviously, I've still got some very good pieces. I don't know if they're going to show up this week. I hope they do. But if they don't, obviously the Timberwolves will take it. I'm going to give it to them because they've shown the ability to play. They may not be consistent, but they've shown a very good ceiling in Minnesota. Next, you have the Knicks, who are hosting the New Orleans Pelicans, coming off their big win. They're a hot team that have played really, really well over the last few weeks. I like the Knicks. I love what they are doing. But, Vic, you do not set your lineup. I don't know how to convince you. I cannot pay you to set your lineup. I know you like playing with us. Set your lineup. And I think this matchup would be really convincingly close. But I don't have faith in Vic setting his lineup. So give me the New Orleans Pelicans in this matchup. Easy peasy. Next is one of the best two games coming up are really, really good matchups. And the first one starts with the Denver Nuggets traveling to Atlanta and seeing what they can try and see if they can pull off a win of epic proportions after falling short this last week to the Lakers. You've got the Nuggets coming off one of their worst performances of the year, while the Hawks are coming off, I'd call a decently lucky win this past week, just based off what they were. I mean, the fact that you faced the Knicks and only put up 7-2-0, and you were still very close in some categories, you've really got to pick it up. So I'm going with Denver. I think they bounce back. I don't think they have another bad performance like they did this past week. So give me Denver in a matchup over the Hawks. Next, we have the Toronto Raptors taking on the Los Angeles Lakers, two longtime friends taking on each other in a good matchup here. Raptors left some on the bone like we talked about. They didn't perform up to what they should have. They should have absolutely stomped the Charlotte Hornets, but didn't. While the Lakers absolutely upset the Denver Nuggets and brought the league even closer, while the Raptors kind of are still trying to run away with the league. This one was tough because the Raptors are who they are. They have James Harden, who's playing his ass off and making his MVP case once again, and I think he gets it this year. As good as I like the Lakers as well as they perform this week, I'm going to take them. I'm skeptical of this, but I'd like to see the Lakers bring Toronto back to the pack, make it more fun. And also, I think the Lakers have what it takes to be a competitive team. Barnes has shown an inclination of being real smart, and it'll be fun to see what happens. So I'm taking the Lakers in an upset this week over the Toronto Raptors, just to see if I feel like I have that gut feeling. So next we have the Charlotte Hornets taking on the Chicago Bulls. Obviously, Sean's not a huge proponent of basketball. He is competing. He is doing something with it. While the Bulls, Steve McGlynn, his ownership group seems to be a little bit absent. He is still with us. I know there's a lot going on there. And I actually think I'm going to take the Charlotte Hornets this week. They've played very well. They've shot well over the last few weeks. I think they're going to make this one pretty close. So give me that one. I'm going to take Charlotte Hornets in an upset over the Bulls. I've got an upset special with two of them, with two upsets this week. And I really think that the Hornets are going to play an interesting game and make it fun this week. So that's all I've got for this week, guys. A little bit different. I mean, obviously, we've done more guest variety or guest shows the last few weeks. This is fun. I was glad to get my mind off of everything going on. You guys always make it fun. You guys are always really helpful. So I want to say thank you once again before I log off for the night. You guys have been great. And once again, 6 weeks left in hockey, 7 left in NBA. Remember, this week for NHL is the extended week because we do have the NHL All-Star Week coming up. So that is still – so that makes – we will only have a basketball show next week, and that will kind of affect it. Obviously, we won't do anything for hockey next week, as with the NHL All-Star Game going on, it does make 2 periods become 1. And then the same will happen with NBA when we get to it in period 18. So keep that open in mind. We will see some very high scores in hockey this week. I think that's going to make this the most fun. I still think schedules will be very close. Obviously, you should have matches like we did this last week of 68 starts to 67. So keep those lineups going. Have a wonderful night. Thank you guys for everything, and I will see you in week 4 of the 2019 season for this league. Good night, everyone.